All right, good morning. Here we are. I'm meeting with Rebecca regarding the community preservation. There's a warrant on town meeting this year with 4 articles, which I'll explain a little bit. This will be a short brief, a little bit of a high-level view of what community preservation is. And I've got some numbers I want to share with you, and I'm also going to ask Rebecca to confirm some of this detail, make sure I have it right. I had a great meeting with Adam Hayward yesterday. He is the chair of the community preservation. So just to kind of bring everything up to speed, what is community preservation? You know, keep in mind, my wife and I, we grew up in Everett, Malden, and we came to this beautiful town 30 years ago. We had a house built, we've raised 4 children. And I have to say that what defines a small bedroom community is some of the beautiful features that we create over time. And a lot of those features have to be funded. And a lot of that funding comes from community preservation. So the way it works is this: we as a town could have either 1%, 2%, or 3% of our property taxes allocated to community preservation. There's a matching mechanism with the state. If we do at least 1%, the state will match 15.9%. And if we do 2% or 3%, that percentage goes higher. Now, in this town, we are at 3%. At some point in the future, the town may decide we want to go to 2 or 1, but we're at 3%. Now, that money is set aside in different buckets, if you will. One of them is open space. The amount of money that's in the open space fund at the moment, as of, this would be June 30 of 2024 numbers, I think. 500, I don't think you have the numbers memorized.
No, I do.
559,350. Then there's another bucket, historic preservation, 34,930. Then there's a third bucket, community housing, 552,695. Now, new money that came in since last year is we're estimating about $787,000. Now, Rebecca, could you help me understand a little bit when we say a 10% set aside, because that's what's in the warrant? What does that mean? Do we take money from one bucket and put it into another bucket? How does that work?
Correct. So the 10% set aside is based on the total amount of revenue that we have in the overall general account for community preservation. And then each individual bucket, as you call them, 10% of that revenue needs to go into those categories for spending for that upcoming
At least 10%?
Yes, at least 10%.
There is another bucket, I think we can call it the general fund, and then there's 776,448. Does that sound right?
So there's.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No.
This is a lot more complicated. I spent over an hour and a half with Adam to understand this, so this is great.
So when you talk about the buckets, you have the main, so all of the monies that are collected go into one fund, and then that general fund has the different set aside of open space, recreation, historic, and affordable housing.
Affordable housing, community housing.
So those 3 buckets are the 10% in each, and that one general fund is where all of the monies go and then get divided into each.
So is the 10% coming from the new money that came in, the 787,000 projected, or money that's already in?
It's the total amount of revenue.
Total amount of revenue. Okay. So that's why when I looked at the sheet and what was mentioned at the meeting the other day, that there was an estimate of 70, if we did 10% set aside, we have 787,000, so 78,700 towards open space, 78,700 towards historic, 78,700 community housing. But here's where the warrant will change that now. So remember, we have to do a minimum 10% set aside. In addition to that, so let me go over the articles. One of the articles, we actually don't have the articles numbered yet, but one of them is for the historic mill building. And there's the request that will be made at town meeting is that $7,000 be allocated basically for the purpose of environmental testing and abatement. Now, that building is still owned by the town, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and no one has applied to do anything with it, whether town or private, as far as you know?
Historic Society as well as the Conservation Commission have expressed interest in utilizing the building, but there's been no formal proposal for its actual reuse or redevelopment or anything beyond the investigating of environmental concerns and or trying to get the building somewhat usable.
Yeah, so it's not really the building's gonna require some work
Correct,
and some money.
correct.
So this $7,000 is just a test to see what's
Just to
possible
test for-
environmentally.
Yes, correct. And
Okay.
that's environmentally to the building as well, not
And to
necessarily.
the building as well. Okay, so it is in disrepair. It's a beautiful building. It's one of the last mill buildings from a beautiful history from the 1800s and early 1900s in South Groveland with mills that operated there. But yeah, maybe we can do something. So at town meeting, people are gonna decide, yeah, let's put some money up to get this looked at to see what's possible. The next one is fascinating. I didn't realize we had 6 different trail systems in Groveland, which is, again, bedroom community. I mean, I grew up in asphalt in Everett and Malden. Not complaining, it was a beautiful place to live, but we came here for some green. We got a lot of green here. So there are 6 different trails. So there is a request for $73,000 for trail enhancement. That's the next article in this warrant. And what that money is for is basically for the supplies and materials for benches and maps and bridges and so forth. And what's really remarkable is there's going to be free labor. There are going to be volunteers from Groveland that are going to provide all of the labor. So the 73,000 is essentially just for supplies and materials. Isn't that great? That's a good piece of news. So the next one is we do have an historic church, the next article. So the Groveland Congregational Church clock and bell restoration, there's going to be a request at town meeting for $25,000. And that basically is to get the clock and the bell chimes to work. This is a bell that was created by Paul Revere. And so we need to make sure that it rings once in a while. So we're going to need a few dollars for that. So that was also submitted by the Community Preservation Committee. The last one that was submitted by the Community Preservation Committee is Affordable Housing and Home Repair Initiative. Now, this one here I want to be very, very careful with. We're not asking at town meeting, we're not going to ask the voters to allocate $20,000 for home improvements. This is $20,000 specifically for, let me see if I understand it. Let me read it. To establish a home repair program. Could you explain it a little bit as far, because I don't understand it in detail. Maybe you do.
So essentially, there's 2 aspects of the application. So the first aspect is in regards to a home repair program. So in many different communities, they have funds called community development block funds. And that's funds from the federal government through the Housing and Urban Development to help income eligible households do repairs on their homes. In Groveland, we don't qualify as a CDBG community, and therefore we don't have funds available like that to help our current residents who are struggling financially, who do need repairs in their homes so that they can stay and be members of the community. So what we're looking to do is use CPC funding because we do have that CPC funding set aside for affordable housing. And as part of the Affordable Housing Initiative, it's to help our current residents and to allow for affordable homes to stay here in Groveland. So the intent with this particular part of the project would be to hire a consultant that would help us establish a program that resembles some of the other programming that we see in some of the other communities, whether they use CDBG funding and or CPC funding, and bring that here in Groveland. So that's just to establish the program. The second part of this application is to try and figure out how we can utilize the funds that we are already collecting as part of the inclusionary bylaw that we have here in Groveland. So if you were to be doing a development here and you had a 9-lot subdivision, you would be required to provide affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
If it was more than 4 units. So after those 4 units, you either provide the unit or you must provide a payment in lieu of providing the unit.
Interesting.
most of the developments that have come into Groveland do not choose to provide the unit, they choose to provide the
pay it.
payment in lieu.
Oh.
So there are money that's set aside in a housing trust that we cannot necessarily utilize because we don't have an affordable housing trust. We can utilize those fundings through partnerships with the Groveland Housing Authority.
Right.
But given the fact that they also oversee many other communities in addition to Groveland and Haverhill, the capacity that they had to take on additional projects is not great. So this proposal would again have the consultant take a closer look at how we can utilize those funds and what we can do to utilize those funds by either creating an affordable housing trust here in Groveland so that that trust can make those decisions and utilize those funds for affordable housing needs here in the community, or partnering with outside organizations like the Groveland Housing Authority and others to try and find creative ways to use that funding here in the community.
Okay. That's really fascinating. We don't qualify for block grants, so we have to do, build our own internal mechanism to be able to do that. And going back to what I had mentioned earlier, the Historic Preservation Fund has $34,930 roughly. So that's a big ask that we're asking 20,000 essentially for a consultant to build on paper a program on how to make this work internally. One last question, the home repairs. So in the future, if we do have a bucket of money where people can access, if they financially are eligible, is it just for the affordable housing? I'm sorry, the development, what is it, the affordable, what is it called? I'm sorry, down the street here, right next to our town meeting. What is that unit called? The redevelopment?
The 40B,
No, the folks that live behind here at town.
the Groveland Housing Authority.
I'm sorry, it's early in the morning. Groveland Housing Authority. Is it just for folks that live there, or is there anybody in the town?
So for the housing repair program, it would be for anybody who's income eligible. So that would mean that anybody who is at 80% area median income and or lower.
That's like
So it would be
fantastic, yeah.
income threshold that you would need to meet in order to get repairs done to your home. And we would, through the program aspect, identify whether or not that's window replacement,
Yeah,
roofs
yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
Because just because somebody here in Groveland doesn't have an affordable house,
Right.
that doesn't mean that their income generation has remained consistent
Yeah.
and that they're not struggling. And we want to help the residents here in the community stay in the community. And if they meet those income thresholds, this is a interesting way to try and give back to the community and make it so that those people can remain.
That's amazing. That's really, we all talked about that. We hear comments at candidates night, we want to make our town a place where people can grow old and people can raise their families, but this is just a beautiful idea, and it's government hitting the pavement and getting stuff done to make people's lives better. That's wonderful. The last, so there are, let's see how many articles. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 articles. We just went through those 4 articles on the community preservation warrant that are sponsored by the Community Preservation Committee. The last one is sponsored by our resident Claire Walsh. And I'll just read it to see if the town will vote to extend the Community Preservation Act project related to the Vito Hand Tub Museum. So we have a very old fire apparatus from colonial days, which has historic value. And I do remember when I was on the board, back in 2017, money had been set aside to rehabilitate that historic piece and also the surrounding structure, a museum, if you will. So the program was for 10 years. So what this is asking for is an extension till 2027, if I have that correct. Now there's $70,000 that was allocated back in 2017 for this project. And so far we have roughly around 52,825, but that money can't be used unless we grant an extension. Now, if this extension is granted, that does not mean that any money is going to be spent, because 2 things have to happen. The Finance Committee will weigh in as to whether this is financially feasible. They don't have the authority to say yes or no, but ultimately they will advise the select board, and then the select board will make a determination as to whether or not the money should be spent to have a conclusion as to, what we can do to create and preserve a museum. Is that just about right?
So the finance board wouldn't necessarily have, like you said, any authority to govern the use of the funds. They would obviously weigh in and because it is a financial article and they do provide recommendations to town meeting at their meetings for the annual town meeting. But I would say that it's more so whether or not the townspeople would like to grant an extension, because this particular article back in 2019 had an extension date. It stated that these funds must be expended by, and forgive me, I don't know the date.
Yeah, okay,
And because they weren't expended, then the monies cannot be utilized. So
okay,
the only body that can make the extension of that project would be town meeting.
town meeting, okay.
So there will be a recommendation from the finance board, and the community preservation committee as a whole has talked about this project at length as well. However, again, the only body that has the ability to extend the use of that project or the use of those funds for that project is town meeting, because there was an expiration date voted on at town meeting by the voters at that point in time.
And that's a distinction that I got wrong, and thanks for clarifying. So the authority is the town meeting, not the select board. And
Yes.
certainly the finance committee will weigh in as advisors. So, yeah, so we're not asking for 52,000 to be spent. We're asking for an extension of time and then a process to see if anything should be done. So, again, my compliments to you. Thank you for keeping us on the straight and narrow. This was muddy to me, and now it's, I don't want to say clear as mud, but a heck of a lot more understandable. And many compliments to Adam Hayward and the people on the Community Preservation Committee. This is hard work, and it's detailed, and it's fascinating. So I hope that this was interesting to you as well. I appreciate your time. Thank you.